Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Blue Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Joe. Today we're going to talk about a topic that is of interest to criminal investigators, but also for patrol officers. One of the things that happened in my career is that I was used a lot by the Detective Bureau before I became a detective because I was an aggressive patrolman. I made a lot of arrests. I flipped a lot of bad guys, and I figured out that if I did that kind of thing, I would get noticed. I wrote good reports. And because of that, I got lucky. And when the Detective Bureau needed an extra person for a surveillance or for some kind of other operation, a raid or whatever, very often they would come to me and say, hey, do you want to be a part of this? Come on, we'll get you, to come out tonight and do surveillance or whatever. And I loved it. It was great. It was a great way to enhance my skill set and to be a better cop. So one of the things that I got to do in the course of my career was to do undercover work. Now, undercover work, let me tell you right now, people say all the time, oh, it's not that hard. You just go to, and they're wrong, right? When you do undercover work for the first time, it's nerve-wracking, right? It's nerve-wracking because you're putting yourself in a position that you're not comfortable with. So when you do a prostitution undercover, or you do a drug buy undercover, or stolen property undercover, whatever it is that you're going to do. The key to all these things, when you're out there undercover, is have a reason to be where you are. So we talked in a previous episode. You want to go back and look at it on surveillance. So I talked about my partner and I. If we had to go to prepare for a search warrant, you have to have a good description of the location. So sometimes you couldn't get in a position to see it from down the block. You had to go right in front so you could describe the house particularly. And we would, pretend we were broken down, and he would come to help me. It would be like we're jump starting our car or whatever. But we get a good opportunity to see the house, and we looked like two guys who belonged there because I had a broken down car and we're fixing it. So one of the things about acting undercover is having that reason to be where you are. So when I was talking to some officers the other day in one of our classes, and one guy was heading off to the county strike force to be a undercover detective for a year. They put you on loan, temporary duty. And he had a lot of questions about, what's it like? What's it going to be like? Problems and of course you're going into dangerous situations, but you really want to immerse yourself in the role. So a couple of the simple ones that I got to do over the course of my career was we had two guys in our apartment complex, and they were going around robbing food delivery people. They would go in, see the delivery person carrying a pizza or carrying a bag of food, and they would run up on them. They both had knives, give us your money. They had masks on, give us your money, this, that, and the other thing. A couple times they even took the food. And it was dangerous because you never know. Are these guys, what if somebody resists? What if the delivery man resists, tries to fight back? Are they going to get stabbed? You could potentially have a homicide over a thing like that, robbery into homicide. At least somebody very badly injured. So we had a bunch of these. We had 3 or 4 apartment complexes, and we had a bunch of them, but especially in one particular apartment complex. So we said, well, what are we going to do? We're always, the patrols are rolling around. But the reality is, if you're going to do that kind of crime, if you see a patrol car, you're not going to do it. So you have to get there in an undercover capacity. You have to either have a place to surveil the area, or you have to try and draw attention to yourself so that you can see it actually happen. So what did we do? Well, I went to the local Domino's, and they were very helpful. They gave me a sign for the top of the car. They gave me a jacket and a hat and a pizza box. And my team got set up in positions of surveillance where they could see this one area of this complex where I could park the car, get out, and start walking between buildings. So we had officers set up all over the place so that they could see me and keep me under surveillance, make sure I didn't get hurt, make sure there wasn't a problem, whatever. And I walked around, literally, with the pizza box with my gun underneath it, like I was delivering, right? Because I didn't want to get stabbed. I wasn't there to shoot anybody, but I wanted to have the drop on them if they jumped out on me. Well, we did this several nights in a row, and we had no luck. Nobody came out. And we went to all different parts of the complex to try and, where are these guys, to try and draw them out. And we didn't have much luck with that. Probably the fourth or fifth night that we were out there, I'm walking around. Okay, here I go. I get out of the car and I'm walking. And I see, looked like movement around the corner of the building. Yeah, but you know what? There's always people walking around. It was dark. It was not too late, 8:30, 9 o'clock. It was dark. And as I go to the corner of this building to make the turn, these two guys jump out on me. And they both got knives. They got masks. Hey, give us all the money. Give us all the money right now. Give us the money. Now, I knew my team was watching me. So I tried to stall for a minute because I knew they'd come running and they were gonna close in from all different points, right? So that we could grab these guys. So what I did is, okay, all right, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Here, take the pizza too. And when I dropped the pizza, of course, their eyes go to the pizza, and then I drew up on them. I said, police. I had a badge underneath. I said, police officer, don't move. You're under arrest. Drop the knives. Get on the ground. Get on the ground. And they were quite surprised. They weren't sure what to do. And then here comes the team running, and they saw it, and you could see they trying to decide should they run. They just dropped the knives and they hit the ground, and we locked them up, which was the right outcome. Nobody got hurt, and we caught these guys, and they ended up confessing in the interview that they had done this. So the whole idea was that I had a reason to be where I was. Was it nerve-wracking? Yeah. Did I have a gun? Yeah. Could have something bad happened? Yes. But isn't that what we do? Isn't that the job we do every day? So let me think of a couple other ones to give you some more examples. Another pizza-related one, very interesting. We had a pizza delivery man show up at headquarters, and he wanted to talk to a detective. So I said, okay, what's up? He goes, listen, I just delivered to this motel some pizza, and I got to tell you, there's about 6 or 7 people in there. There's drugs everywhere, and there's little babies in the room. There's babies in diapers crawling around in the room, and all these people. I'm telling you, there was pot. I saw some coke, all kinds of stuff. I said, thank you very much. I ran to the Domino's, got the hat, the sign, and a pizza box. My team went running down there. Now, what was good about this is that this motel was a 2-story motel, and I could get up onto that landing, and I had cops on both sides of me right there, a couple of guys in uniform and a couple of detectives, that when they looked out the window through the peephole, or if they opened the door, they would only see me. They wouldn't see the cops right there, but I had a team quickly to move in. So what I did is I went up and I banged on the door. I said, what do you want? Who is it? And I pizza, Johnny's Pizza. And the guy opens the door really annoyed. He goes, we already got our pizza. And I said, that's great. I dropped the box. Don't move. You're under arrest, because I could see in there. I could see the drugs and stuff. And the team moved up, and the guy started to step back, and he saw the uniformed officer. Everybody surrendered. And we got in. We found quite a lot of drugs. A lot of drugs. Let's just put it that way. A lot of money. But it was successful. It was a successful operation because we thought quickly to move quickly and to do it. I've done prostitution undercovers. Okay, prostitution undercovers in New Jersey. Believe it or not, back in the day, you used to have these officers. You used to pick a single officer, a guy who was not married, or so this way, when you went to see the prostitute, you didn't have a problem at home, and that's a genuine thing. You joke around, but if you're going to do a prostitution undercover, and back in the day, they used to actually have sex with the prostitutes, not necessarily intercourse, but there'd be some kind of sexual activity with the prostitute. And then you would be able to say, this person offered me sex for money, and then follow through it. Well, there was a major case here in New Jersey that took place during the course of an investigation of massage parlors, where they were given happy endings, masturbating the customers at the end of the massage. And that led to a very serious incident where an officer lost his life. And the courts were reviewing the documents for the search warrants when they would go back in. You go in, you engage yourself in sex with these people 3-4 times, prove it's prostitution, get a search warrant, and then you go in, you take all the revenue, you take their records, and all that stuff, and you figure out who's running the business. And it's just spider webs, right, into lots of things. Well, the judge realized that officers were actually having sex with these people and said, That's it. No more sex. You got to get them to make an offer of sex for money, and then that's going to be good enough, to prove that they were willing to take the money. So when I say we used to use single people, that's at some point you don't have single people to use. You have married people or people who are engaged or whatever. So I decided I would do a couple of them. So the first thing I did is I told my wife, said, "Hey, Mrs. Lieutenant Joe, just so you know, I'm going to be doing this." And she said, "Are you going to have sex with these girls?" I said, "Of course not. Yeah, I got to go in. I'm going to, get them to solicit me sex for money. And that should usually be enough. I'm going to have a wire on so my team outside can hear it. And then I have to find a way to get out of there without getting involved in it. And then we can go back in and lock people up." So I did that. I went in, I had signed up under a specific fake name. And the reason I used a specific fake name is because that was part of my investigation when we went back in. If we didn't go that night and we got a search warrant and came back if we needed that, when we went through the documents, we would find a document with the name I used, right? Because they kept track of who's coming in, who's coming and going, right? They had a file on all of that stuff. You wouldn't believe it, but they did because they had to be accounting for what they're doing. And I went in and young lady says, "All right, strip down, get on the table." And she starts massaging your back. She says, "Turn over." She says, "You want me to massage the penis?" And I was like, "Is that included in the price?" She goes, "Yes, it is." And I said, "Okay. Is there a tip involved?" She goes, "Well, you can tip if you want." And at that point, I said, "Listen, this was my story." I said, "Listen," and I sat up and covered myself up, and I said, "Listen, I can't do this. I just recently got separated, and I thought I could do it, but I realized I can't. I might want to go back, and I don't want to. This is almost like cheating. I don't want to do it. She's like, "Oh no, no problem, no problem. You can come back anytime you want." So I got myself out of there, but I had the offer of sex for money, which was good enough. And when we did go back, we sent in a couple other undercovers to prove it was an ongoing situation. When we did finally go back, I went through all the records, and there was the form that they filled out with my name on it to prove it, kind of tightening up my case. So was that weird? Was that strange? It was, but it's part of our job. It's part of what we do, being an undercover. And I think the last one that I'll talk about, this one was very interesting. We had I'm going back a little bit in time when TV was different than the streaming TV we have now. There were, when Dish TV first came out, a lot of you still see Dish TV today, most of it's streaming. But back in the day, you had to have a cable box in your house. So it came through the stream, came into the cable box, and whatever channels you paid for are the ones that would be in your cable box, right? They could program it from remotely from their place using the signal, so you could get HBO and Showtime and movies, whatever it is you wanted. But whatever you paid for was on that box. And at the time, I think there were like 600 channels you could choose from. So we had a patrol sergeant, midnight sergeant, and he sees me in the morning and he says, "Hey, just so you know, man, I found this." And he had a piece of paper. It was a homemade poster somebody made. "Hey, do you want to get all 600 Dish channel TV channels for $29.95? Call this number." He goes, "So I don't know. We know there's scams out there, but this was in an ATM. When you walk into the ATM, there's a little table there at the bank." And he saw that. He goes, "There was a couple of them here." So I took one to show it to him. So I said, "Okay." Well, we had an undercover phone line. This is even before cell phones were everywhere. We had an undercover phone line that came back to a couple, Bob and Mary Jones, whatever it was, in a local apartment complex. Right now, of course, we didn't have an apartment. We just had, that was the address that was created for it as an undercover phone. So we had to do stuff. People would call that number. If they looked it up, they would know that that number came from an apartment right in town. So I called this guy up and I said, "Hey, I got this poster, man, and I'm going to buy a Dish system. How do I get all 600 channels for $29?" And he says, "Well, I can program the box for you." "For $29?" He goes, "Yeah, it's $29, and you get all 600 channels." I said, "That's great. How do I do that? Do you do it, through the stream? What goes on?" He goes, "No, no. There's a card in the system." So there used to be a card that was programmed. So when you bought it, they would send you the card. You plugged it into the system, and whatever you paid for was on. You had access to. So he goes, so there's a card in that system. He goes, when you get your system, when you buy it, get that card and call me back, and I'll meet you and I'll program it for you. I said, okay. So I let it go for a day or so, trying to be realistic with the guy. 2 days later, I called him up and said, hey, I got my system. What do I do? So he tells me where he lives. But the guy was not stupid. He says he lived in this apartment complex, but he was going to meet me. There was a Pep Boys around the corner from the apartment complex. He says, meet me at the Pep Boys. Meet me at the Pep Boys, at 8 o'clock or whatever. So we knew his apartment was in this complex. We just didn't know exactly where. So when you send an undercover in, whether it's you or somebody else on your team, you really need to pay close attention to where everybody is and keep that person safe, right? And there has to be, we had at the time, we didn't have a lot of sophisticated technology, but we had an emergency thing we could do. We would break a window if I was in danger or the undercover was in danger. They would break a window. The team is watching. They'd all come running. As things got more technical later on, we did have Kells, and we had small. It looks like a pager back in the day when there was pagers, but it was a sender. Right. So you could send signals through it and they could hear me. Right. And you would say, hey, listen, I got to tell Uncle Bob about this. And that was the safe word. And then everybody would come running, whatever it was. So I meet this guy at Pep Boys and he pulls in. I told him what kind of car I had. And he looks at me and he goes, come over here. So I go over and I get in his car and he goes, so who are you? And I tell him, dude, I'm, whatever job I had made up. Because if you're going to go undercover, you have to have at least a cover story, a simple cover story. Where do you live? What do you do for work? How long you've been doing it? You don't have to, like on TV, you got to, they ask you a million questions. They really don't, for things like this, low level kind of things. So I told him who I was. I was a retail salesman or whatever, and I wanted to get this system. And he goes, oh, okay. All right. And in his car, there were all those posters that he had made. There was a whole stack of them in the back seat. And he goes, all right, well, follow me over to my apartment. And I'm like, all right, what building we going to? I was trying to get some information so that my team would know what building to go to. I had a radio in my car. And he goes, why? Why do you want to know my address? I got to know where I'm going. He goes, you follow me. I'm like, all right, fair enough. Let's go. So he pulls out. We go around. We pull into the complex. We had officers, and it was a main street into the complex, and then the buildings went off from there. So we had officers strategically placed around, not knowing where I was going to end up going. As we end up going around, like I said, I had a police radio, handheld police radio, because I was in an undercover car. It wasn't a Crown Victoria or anything like that. It was some of the cars we seized, but it didn't look like police car. But I had this radio, and I turned it on, and I clicked it, and I said, okay, we're heading over to the complex. He's going to take me to his apartment. Okay, here we go. We pull in. I think it was building 18. I still remember. It was building 18. I said, okay, I'm at building 18, ladies and gentlemen, building 18. And I sat in my car for a minute and I'm doing whatever. And I'm looking at my wallet like I'm counting money. All I was really doing is trying to buy time for my team to get in place so they could see me and see what apartment I went into. Now, these apartments had ground floor. You'd open up a vestibule door and there was a ground floor apartment door. And then you'd go up a set of stairs to the upstairs. And I didn't know which one I was going to. So I was giving them a chance to get into place. Now, they were professionals. My guys were really good. They knew what they were doing, and I knew they weren't far away. So I tried to buy a minute or two, and the guy's, getting out of his car, and he's going, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm counting money, right? So, okay, get out of the car. I go in. We end up going to the upstairs, the upstairs apartment. And I was really hoping that this was all on the up and up. This guy was just selling cable TV, and that my team saw me go upstairs, right? So we go upstairs into the guy's apartment. Nobody was more surprised than me. We walk in, and literally, this guy had a computer set up, a desktop computer, and he had a rack of televisions. He had to have 15, 16 televisions on this rack around the computer thing. And we get in there, and he says, he goes, all right, give me a minute. He turns on the computer. I'm just standing there looking around. I'm making observations. What am I doing when I'm making observations? I'm looking for weapons. I'm looking for other people. I'm looking for dogs, all kinds of things, because we're going to get a warrant. We're going to go back. So as I'm looking around, he goes, all right, give me the card. You got the card? And I said, yeah. And I go through my wallet and I hand him my card. He takes the card. He plugs it into this system. He's doing whatever. All these TVs he turns on, so they all come on, and he's going through and he goes, "Oh, look, you got Showtime now. You got HBO. You got this. You got Prime Time." He goes, "All right, you got 15 weather channels. There were porn channels. Everything that you could get, he put on this card." And he goes, "All right, this is it. This card is good. I'll reload it 3 times." I'm like, "What do you mean reload it?" He goes, "Well, sometimes they send a bullet through the system to wipe out the fake cards. I'll do it 3 times. After 3 times, you got to pay the $29 again." It's like, "All right." I gave him 30. I said, "Listen, I got 30. Don't worry about the dollar." He goes, "All right, thanks a lot." I said, "So that's it. I just plug it in." He goes, "That's it. You get all the channels. Call me if they send a signal and wipe it out with 3 times. That's it." I said, "All right." So I left, got in the car. The team saw me. Away we went. 3 or 4 days later, I called him up and he goes, "What happened? Did blank you?" I said, "No, my brother-in-law wants to get a system. Can he come and get a card?" So what I was trying to do was now expand the investigation by bringing in another undercover. Right? Bring in another undercover to go in and buy a card. Now you show that this guy's doing this regularly. He's making money off it, etc. So I'm trying to remember if we sent in. I think we did. We sent in another one of our officers, went in, and he bought a card. So now we had 2 cases of this guy doing this. And what's interesting is I had reached out to Dish Network at the time, and I talked to them, and they said they're getting wiped out, with people stealing this cable. So they were willing to send me a system. They sent me 5 cards, 5 blank cards, and a whole system. Right? I said I didn't really need the whole system. I just needed the cards, but they sent the whole system. When I asked them, now it shows you say, okay, it's cable TV, $29. What's the big deal? When I asked Dish Network if I had to buy every one of those programs and channels, what would it be worth? It was in the multiple thousands of dollars this guy was selling to people that they were stealing from Cablevision. Now, it wasn't gold bars and it wasn't dollar bills, but it was the value of that cable that they were stealing, thousands and thousands of dollars for the 29 bucks. Now, here's the interesting part. When I described this guy, we got a search warrant, we got an arrest warrant. And I described this guy, he was like, he didn't appear dangerous at all. We looked up his apartment. We knew who he was. We ran him criminal history. He didn't have any criminal history. So we're confident that it's going to be a safe raid and we're going to be good. Well, we go to where he worked. Where did he work? It was like a retail store is where he had a job. I don't know, like a food store, something like that. But I went with another officer and we go to arrest him, another detective, and he walk in and I see him and he goes, "Hey man, what's up?" And I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "I want you to meet my friend here. This is Sergeant McDermott." And he looks at him like this. He goes, "Sergeant." And when he put his hands out to shake my partner's hand, I hit him with the cuffs right on there. Right. So you're under arrest for the cable thing, this, that, and the other thing. And he was like, oh, he was so upset. We had a search warrant for his car, for his person, and for his apartment. The car, why? Because he had the posters in the car. So obviously he was using the car as part of the system. So we want to search that. We wanted a search warrant for him. He might have money, cards on him, all kinds of things. We want to search his body. Even though if we're arresting him, we could have searched him anyway. Just get the search warrant. It's just easier to get it. And then we had one for the apartment. So we said, oh, we're going to go back to the apartment. We're going to search your apartment. We want you to help us dismantle because we're confiscating everything. And he was all upset. What do I get help for this? I said, dude, let's just go back and do what we have to do. So we got back to the apartment. We dismantled everything. He showed us where everything. Then we searched the apartment. Now, what were we looking for? You say the computer, of course, the computer he was making the cards, the reader, and then all the TVs. But what else? We were looking for proceeds of this operation. I was looking for a printer, for more posters, for any other information, other cards, anything else he could have to do with this scam. I wanted to search the apartment. So a key here when getting a search warrant is think of the smallest possible thing that you could be looking for, because that lets you get into everything. So the example I always give is that if you are doing an investigation for somebody selling illegal shotguns and you get that warrant, can you look in a dresser drawer for a shotgun? No, you wouldn't expect shotguns to be in a dresser drawer. But if you asked for gun permits, if you asked for paperwork for the shotguns, that could be anywhere. Now you can go in all those drawers, ammunition, you can go in everything and look at everything. So we were looking for any and all documentation, this, that, and the other thing. While we were searching, we found not one, but two defaced firearms, right? One was a small one. It was a 22 long rifle pistol that was defaced. And then I think it was a 9 millimeter, right? It wasn't a 30, it was 9 millimeter handgun, defaced, and it had cop killer bullets in it. At the time they were armor piercing bullets or whatever, go through a vest. Now here's a guy, unassuming guy that we thought, oh, no big deal. But why did he have these two defaced firearms in his place? I don't know. We locked him up. He ended up pleading guilty. We charged him with theft of service for hundreds of thousands. They ended up making a deal with him at the prosecutor's office. He got whatever time he got. We found his bank account information. We looked in there and there was lots of money in there. So we went for forfeiture on his money. We seized all of that. We seized his car, the computers, everything that was in there. We took all of it. And doing that undercover was interesting, like I said, but we felt confident. No big deal. This guy's no big deal. He's a dope selling computer stuff or whatever. And he had two defaced firearms with, I don't know. It wasn't hollow point. They called them cop killer bullets at the time. They would go through a vest, whatever it was. Scary as hell once we got all those things, because why does this guy have these things? What's he involved with? So we got charged with all the weapons and everything. So the whole idea here, as a patrol officer or detective, you can be put in a position to do an undercover. I know a lot of times when we would do things, we had younger looking officers. We would use them. Hey, come in, dress down. We're going to go and do an alcohol scam at one of the bars where they're serving underage. We're gonna get you in there, and then you're gonna look around and do whatever. See if you see underage people in there, but you look younger. Not 21 Jump Street like they put kids in the high school. Although we did have two guys young enough to probably look pretty young enough to do that. We never did anything like that. So have a reason to be where you are. Be prepared to be nervous. It's okay to be nervous. Want to make sure that your team knows what they're doing. You want to make sure that your team is in place. You want to make sure you have communications. Today, you can have all kinds of electronic devices, right? You can have glasses that have cameras in them. You can get all kinds of a pen. You can get a pen that has a transceiver in it, all kinds of things. Get the right equipment. Make sure your team knows what they're doing. Set up emergency plans. What if you can't make a transmission? How do you tell them to come get you? Right? So our thing was always, you see something come crashing out of that window, and as silly as that sounds, if you're in there in a bad situation and you got to let people know, come and get me. If that's the best I can do, I'm throwing something through the window. My team knows they're coming. All right. So doing undercover stuff, you can do it at any point in your career. There's challenges that come with every different kind of it. It is a lot of fun and it is exciting. And I'll tell you a funny story on Tales from the Road. Not today, but next time we do a Tales from the Road about an officer who did an undercover on a prostitution. And we still joke with him about it today, 15 years later, about what happened during that event. So I want to thank you all for being here. Remember my sponsors, Blue 360 Media, RiotTint.com, and Medical Essential Diagnostics, right? Three great companies that care about you, care about law enforcement, and do the right thing. Now, subscribe to this channel. It helps us, right? Subscribe. Tell your friends about it. I'm trying to bring as much this kind of information and other topical things to you as I can, so that you can be better at your job and you can protect and serve the way we're all supposed to do. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you down the road.